If I was to choose one thing that dentistry has given the world in the last 150 years, it would be silver amalgam films. They completely changed the way we take care of our mouths from a period where we simply waited until teeth rotted out, infected, and then extracted them, and either had spaces or then had dentures. So this is an inexpensive, efficient, and very hardy material that can be used by almost any dentist. I can easily teach the bottom student in my dental class how to do a very credible silver filling. And that's just not the case of with some of the other replacements, either gold or white fillings. You know, and the old joke, you know, what do you call the guy that graduates last in his dental school class or medical school class? Doctor. So, you know, not everybody is really equipped to do other kinds of work in a particular kind of setting. I happen to have a practice here in mid-Manhattan. I can afford to take the time. I train myself to do the white fillings very well. I feel they're probably the equivalent with some advantages over silver fillings. And I'm very comfortable placing them. I haven't placed a silver filling in 8 years. That's merely the supply and demand of my area, though. And it angers me when I hear people turning away from something that is just one of the greatest materials we've ever produced for some ineffable fear of some distant disease. So that's how I start my So what is it? Well, first of all, it's pretty ugly. You know, if you had your choice, well, you know, would you want to have a tooth that didn't have a filling in it or one that did? Well, obviously, you know, it's not something pleasant to have in your mouth. Tin mercury amalgams were used in China as early as 600 AD. They were invented in France with silver and mercury in the 1830s. They were brought to America by a couple of French brothers, which immediately started the amalgam wars, where some various groups sued one another to get them to stop placing, dentists to stop placing amalgam. And after a while, it was so self-evidently easy and efficacious that the prosecuting side lost out in it and ultimately disbanded their society, which was the dominant society, dental society in the country at that time.
Can you stop on what basis? What basis did they try to stop?
I don't know. You know, this is just sort of prehistory. You know, it's just interesting factoids. G.B. Black is held to be one of the fathers of modern dentistry, and either invented his own silver filling mixture, or certainly popularized it. And certainly his techniques for placing silver fillings are still in use today. The concept of extension for prevention, where we're going further up into a tooth than we really need to, just to make sure that it doesn't have a cavity in the future, and a variety of things like that. Early amalgams made by heating tablets and spoon until mercury started coming out, sort of like, I guess, the precursor of crack cocaine. And then mixing them with a morning pestle. They were, in about the 1930s, we got a more modern formulation of amalgam that we use today. It's about 50% mercury, and then the rest is a mix of other alloys, silver being the primary. And the solid metals together make up an alloy. When mixed with mercury, they form an amalgam, and hence the name amalgam. So where did this begin? Because certainly when I was growing up in the 60s, no one ever said anything to me about danger from mercury fillings. No one was concerned about it. Historically, worries about mercury have gone back to Hippocrates, who was worried about the safety of mercury. So where did this come up? Hal Huggins, Colorado dentist, came out in the early 70s and started circulating information about the safety of mercury in silver fillings. He wrote a book, It's All in Your Head, in '85. I think this other one, Uninformed Consent, came later. And all of a sudden, there was a real big outcry about silver fillings. This peaked a few years later. Some of the things he was worried about are neurological, cardiovascular, neurological, a whole panoply of symptoms here, leading to multiple sclerosis, depression, high or low blood pressure, tachycardia, arthritis, this whole thing. And even now, high cholesterol. So I went to his website, and he's got a website, and he's shocked now and wondrously impressed by the fact that this affects your cholesterol. So this goes on. He's also currently applying treatments to Gulf War syndrome. Feels he can solve Gulf War syndrome by taking out your fillings. Feels he's being hampered and affected by the government. You know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories here, conspiracy thinking that the whole world is against him and his groundbreaking work. He found other materials that are amalgam toxic. Zinc, copper, nickel. Apparently, you can take zinc and copper in your multivitamin, and it's good for you, but zinc in a silver filling is bad for you. So really now, everything is bad for you. And he even found several compounds in composite fillings harmful, which are the white fillings that are now replacing silver here in first world countries. I actually sort of agree with him on this, in that, you know, everyone's griping about silver and mercury and all of this. It's been around for 150 years. And these are natural elements. It's naturally occurring parts of our ecosystem, okay? These other materials are stuff that guys come up with in labs. We're assuming that they're safe, and I'm sure that they are actually, but we don't have 150 years of usage of this stuff, so God only knows what we're putting into our mouths. And if you really want to get that worried about it. And there are people who do. So this is what they look like. You know, this is what it'll look like the day you put it in. This is a few years later. You know, they start to wear down a little bit, and early on, they really did wear quite a bit more than silver fillings, and they were not endorsed by most reputable authorities as fillings for the back teeth. We've always used them in front teeth. You know, obviously you don't want to have a silver filling in your incisor. But in the back, really, it's only, I would say, in the last 15 years that they've gained wide acceptance as posterior filling materials, in other words, in the back of your mouth. And they do stand up fairly well, but they require a very, very exacting technique. Any moisture contamination at all will mean that the thing has got a leak, and you'll rapidly get recurrent decay around it, or sensitivity. Blood, anything like that is out. It's a multi-step procedure using fairly expensive materials, considerably more expensive than silver. And if they're not done just right, in a really, really conscientious manner, you're going to have a lot of problems. Also, just contouring them is a problem. We have a lot of problems getting contacts between teeth, so you get a lot of food trapped between your teeth. A lot of guys are still having that problem. I was talking to a world famous periodontist, and he says, look, down in South Carolina where I'm teaching, these guys, you know, they're putting in white fillings, but they're not getting the contacts right between the teeth. You know, still not doing. This is just a year ago. So I emailed him down my protocol for how I do my fillings, and he just emailed me back. He says, there's no way I could teach this. It's just too complicated. So it still remains a more difficult to manipulate material as opposed to silver, which I've seen silver fillings that have been in the mouth for many years with thumbprints in it, where the guy just stuck it in, you know, he's probably in a Medicaid practice or something, jammed the thing in, carved out a little excess, and told the patient to get going. That's not uncommon. You could put it into a pool of saliva or blood or something like that. They work great. It doesn't matter. It's like, it's just this miracle material. And there's something about it that's bacteriostatic as well. So you just don't get as much recurrent decay around it as you would. And indeed, the other day I was doing surgery in someone else's office, and the patient needed a filling at the same time. And he did use amalgam. And I said, great, give me that stuff. And I just put it in the middle of surgery, blood all over the place and everything, and it was fine. And it was great. It's not something I possibly could have done with white filling materials. Okay. So, what he would do is he would measure the electric current. We're going back to Huggins now. he would measure the electric current in your fillings. And supposedly he was able to get a galvanic current response and use this to determine the correct order to take out the fillings. Because he alleges now that if you take out the fillings in the wrong order, you could make things worse. So not only do you have to take out the fillings, but you have to take out the fillings with the Huggins protocol. And indeed, he now has a network of dentists that work with him that use the Huggins protocol of how to determine what to do with people who have silver fillings in their mouths. Now he's also finding root canals to be responsible for God only knows how many diseases. Okay? So, and this is because he feels that the root canal treating dentist can't really take out all of the infected tissue from the root, because indeed the tips of the roots have a variety of different pathways and side channels and things that can't. You can think of it as like a Mississippi Delta or something like that. At the end, and it's really hard to fill all of that. So there's some residual germs in there, and they're going to continue to give you long-term infections in your body that you won't really be aware of. He finds them to be primary etiologies in sinus inflammation, not just every now and again. The prime etiology, the root canal, and your sinus problems. Now, the maxillary sinus is the one that we're concerned about. It's over the side. It's only one of 4 or 5 major sinus groups. It's one of the simplest sinuses to work with. Again, this doesn't bear out. It just doesn't make sense.
Is he postulating a mechanism?
He probably does. You know, well, one thing about a skeptic is just because someone is making an argument doesn't mean I have to research his whole argument if I don't like it. So, there's always, he found, now this is again off of his own website, there was always a strong psychological component with all of the people he was treating. And that if they didn't get strong support from their home, that would affect the outcome of their treatment. So in other words, this is a great out, all right? So I've taken out your silver fillings, I've given you the Huggins method. If you're not getting better, it's because you didn't have a good family, or you had a psychological problem, okay? So he's introducing a series of cofactors that just can't be defined to his whole way of thinking.
That's like pulling teeth.
It's like pulling teeth. He was worried that his work is not going to be respected because of his lack of controls. Well, what would you say, Elena? Probably.
I would do horrible things to that person.
There's a conspiracy by the ADA with a liability of $82 quintillion. In other words, the ADA's liability for covering up for the supposed toxicity of silver fillings is 5 million times greater than our national debt. Until next week, which might be a little closer. So, you know, now let's take a look at this.